We are artists and explorers. We are liberators and survivors. We are fighting for peace and finding the cure. We're remembering the past and looking to the future. We are caring for each other, and we are proud. We are Western Washington. These are our stories, and this is your program.
Don McCune was a true pioneer of local television. For more than half a century, he connected viewers to the natural resources of Puget Sound. First as Captain Puget, and then on the adventure series Exploration Northwest. Tonight, Full Focus takes a closer look at these programs, the impact they had, and how television can still play a vital role in our community. In 1957, Como TV in Seattle was looking for a host for a new children's television show. They were looking for someone who could introduce children to the natural world around them, could sail a ship or wrestle an octopus, and could sing songs and play the guitar. They would find this unique mix of abilities in a young man named Don McCune.
I'm a Puget Sound sailor on the old Windward Ford. Give me way, hey, blow the man down.
The Captain Puget show was a way of acquainting the kids with the region they live. He was all about telling the kids about the Northwest, showing them various sea creatures, singing sea chanties.
It was in 1853.
You know, television, I remember as a kid, it was so much larger than just my life. The JP and Captain Puget and Stan Borson were just giants. They were stars in the truest sense to me as an 8, 9, 10-year-old.
Say, looks like we got a stranger aboard today. How are you?
Fine.
What's your name?
Wow.
You may have been a girl or a Boy Scout, and you would look forward breathlessly for as much as a year or two to sit down with Captain Puget. So it was the connection more than anything else, which is why local shows are so important, because not only does it connect us to each other, but it connects us to the greater us.
Bill Warren, the TV station manager, really felt that the Captain Puget image would be a person who would make the children more knowledgeable of the region.
This is used in skin diving, and a little bit later on, we're going to find out how it's used, and along with a lot of other things. As a matter of fact,
life was being lived slower than it's being lived today. People would take the time to sit down for a half an hour on a Wednesday night, to learn about a place near them. They would take the time every day to just spend an hour with JP or with Captain Puget. They hit that common chord, which is really about connecting. And it is something that just doesn't happen with a distant cable channel or a network.
Well, you can take that along with you. And thanks a lot for stopping aboard the Windward Ford. Want to shake hands? Huh? You got your hands pretty full.
Como Television realized that a program that connected people with their local natural resources was just as important for adults as it was for children. It began to develop an outdoor adventure show that could inform people about the environment, history, and culture. The show would be written and narrated by Don McCune.
Happy as a butter clam when tides are high, I sing a grateful ode to Puget Sound, the land of everything.
Exploration Northwest first hit the airwaves in 1960 and would be a mainstay of local television in this community for more than 20 years.
There was a lot of wanting to experience life more, not just do what mom and dad did, not just work and come home every night and and watch TV and go to bed. And so people wanted to experience things, and Exploration Northwest was sort of was sort of an opportunity to experience something, but still be at home watching TV. And for me, working on Exploration Northwest, it was a great opportunity to get out in the world and see things and do things.
The Exploration Northwest series traveled Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, Alaska, a little bit into the Yukon, maybe a few into Idaho. That was their definition of the Northwest. And they went to film any kind of interesting thing that happens in the Northwest. It could be Indian cultures, it could be an old logging camp, it could be a fishing trip, any number of subjects but outdoors.
And it was the perfect opportunity. We did everything from raft trips to horseback riding trips, canoe trips, helicopter skiing, and anything you can think of practically. So it was a terrific experience for me.
Darrell Benedict joined the crew about the time we converted to sync sound and the gear got heavier. He doesn't know what it's like to take off to the woods without a 25-pound camera strapped to his back and hanging onto a tripod. And we're not about to tell him.
We were shooting on film. The idea of having a film camera, for me, film camera was a piece of mechanical equipment that you would pick up, and there was something that was very exciting about a film camera, because it's a whole different kind of technology that feels different than like a video camera or a computer. To be able to pick it up and load it with film and hear it whirring away next to your ear.
Go over here and get a couple of face shots.
Other shots? Okay.
Okay.
If I remember what I said.
Cut a couple more pieces, Eileen, and then call for Ev. Wait till Darrell, hold it.
Wait a second, I'll tell you when to go.
Yeah.
You would have a connection to so many of the stories that he explored because you'd been there, or you'd seen that, or it was in your neighborhood, or it was in the region. And it created a much bigger desire to learn more and to visit those places because Don McCune had been there.
I mean, when somebody hands you a canoe paddle, you can usually figure out it's not going to be about snowmobiles, right?
He truly loved the outdoors and truly loved being outside. And he was a great storyteller. He wanted to tell this story. I think the reason he wrote in such a poetic manner was he had such a long background in radio. And he, on radio, had to paint a verbal image of what was being told. So his scripts for these Exploration Northwest shows, they augment the video.
It's 6 a.m. and easing out a veil with enough horsepower to unthread the Space Needle, 776 heads for South Bay near Olympia with the first load of the day.
Going out in the van to shoot a show was just great. It was 4 guys all getting together, and it was one long party. And we all knew we had work to do, but it was kind of a macho man situation, where we're all making fun of each other and laughing and telling off-color jokes, and of course we did way too much drinking, but it was a great experience. And we had many great experiences, and we all suffered together a lot, and we were all very proud when we put together a great show. And the great shows usually required a lot of hard work and a lot of sometimes a lot of suffering. A lot of times it was just extremely hard work. I remember shooting a horseback ride in outside of Stehekin, in the Chelan, on Lake Chelan. And if you're doing a horseback trail ride in the mountains, most of the time trails and mountains are switchbacks. They go back and forth up a hill. But my job was always to basically get the people riding by. Most of the show was people riding horses, riding by me. And so to get ahead of the horses riding by, I had to go straight up the hill, right up through these switchbacks to get ahead of them. And so I was really sweating. It was really a lot of work and exhausting, because I didn't have a horse. I was on foot and I was running to get ahead of them. We were on the Sagres, a Portuguese naval training ship, which is like a tall-masted ship. The idea was we were going to sail the ship from San Francisco back to Seattle, and we were all very, very excited. And so we got on the ship in San Francisco, and unfortunately the prevailing winds were from the north, and so it ended up that we had to go way out into the ocean and just power all the way north. And so it was about a 9-day trip, and I was seasick the entire time. They gave us a cabin down in the infirmary, which is way down in the bowels of the ship, and it smelled like a cross between sewage and kerosene, and of course a boat that size was just going up and down the waves and up and down the waves, and I just remember walking, trying to get out of that out of my bunk and walk around and actually consume some food, and the Portuguese sailors would see me walking by and go, "Ejuwadu," which is Portuguese for seasick. And that's the only thing I really learned in Portuguese. And then trying to, at some point we realized we really had to shoot a show, and I was just deathly seasick, so I can remember climbing the mast of this thing, trying to, very weakly, trying to climb this mast, to get wide shots looking down at the bow, going through the waves and everything, and I'm seasick and trying to hang on, and it was very, very scary. But eventually we did get back to Seattle, and we had survived.
He did a story on Sasquatch, 1978, and he interviewed some of the more credible people that were researching, and a couple of eyewitness reports, one of whom was a state trooper working in the Enumclaw area. He did lots of research. It was a very interesting episode, and they were able to use that Patterson footage. And I read all the books that he brought home for his research, and so we watched the show together, the episode, and it ends, and Don says, "Well, good show, sorry there's no such thing." And I looked at him and said, What do you mean there's no such thing? You didn't believe that state trooper? He said, "Well, honey, I've been in the woods all my life, and I would have seen one by now." And I said, "Well, you've been in the woods with 4 loud cameramen. You're never." I said, "How many cougars have you seen?" He says, "Actually, we've never seen a cougar."
Climbing diagonally up this embankment here. No time did it drop to all fours or anything like that. It just walked diagonally on 2 legs up to the top of the hill.
That's one of those shows that was probably before its time.
If we get down there and there's lots of icebergs and it's not too dangerous. I mean, don't push their luck. But if we can get a boat going in front of an iceberg like that, it would really be a dynamite shot. We can't
like on
see.
the Glacier Bear stuff.
Like on the Glacier Bear, yeah.
In Exploration Northwest's day, it was a very well-produced show. But what really separated it was the writing. It was just written so well. I remember one episode, and Don McCune is sitting next to a campfire, and he's got a cowboy hat on. And he talked about stirring the embers of the soul.
And looking back down the long trail of retrospect, stir again the embers of the past.
And I thought, wow, that's good writing. And he could turn what seemingly might be a mundane location, or even an average story, into Shakespearean platitudes. It was really good writing. And that was as engaging as the story itself.
These we found in the gang ranch. Reminders of a long succession of sod busters and settlers who tamed this empire.
Don wrote and narrated 412 episodes for the series in the 21 years it was on the air.
For the most part, the show was Don's writing, Don McCune's writing, and his writing fit the time.
That army of fortune, who in hunger, hope, and despair had once faced this rocky defile and found here the measure of the man.
And he would wax poetic about the scenery and about the relationships of the people, in the show and that kind of thing. And then he'd get to the end and say something like, "This has been yet another thread in the rich tapestry of the Pacific Northwest." And and that's the kind of show it was, largely up until the time that I came. And then we got a sound camera, and I can still remember getting the new sound camera, taking it out of the box, and from that point on, we started shooting interviews and having live sound ups of all the action that was happening on the show. And it was a different kind of show then.
Perhaps not the same specters that excite.
It was becoming kind of the end of Don's era, and more of a cinema verite kind of documentary style of show, and that's kind of what television became from that point on.
Don retired in 1981, having completed 412 episodes of Exploration Northwest.
He always wanted to be remembered as Don McCune, the writer and narrator of Exploration Northwest. If you asked him, if you didn't know him and you just met him and asked him what he did for a living, he would just say, "I'm a writer." Real humble, "I'm a writer." He wanted to be known as a writer.
Exploration Northwest was a unique program that allowed people to see very real possibilities for their own lives on television.
Yeah, I think in the Seattle market, local programming has always been very important. And when I say local programming, I mean programs that take people who live in the Northwest to different corners of their area and show them the different things they can do, whether it be outdoor things or things that are more focused on medical issues or just things that are inspiring.
Occupying a front row seat in this instance would have placed us high on the list of endangered species.
But Exploration Northwest, I think, may have been the program that kind of started the whole idea of local programming in this market, that as something that could be successful for a very, very long time.
One of the bigger challenges of television is to break through its own medium. I mean, it is a passive medium. And it's difficult to take a passive medium to create action from passivity. It's not an easy challenge. Exploration Northwest was able to do that in that it did get people up. It did get them exploring their environment.
Shows like Exploration Northwest and any show that takes people out and shows them their local environment are always going to be popular, and people are always going to need those and always going to want those. The people of the Northwest are much more focused on their environment. You know, they're probably the reason a lot of people are in the Northwest is because they want to be by the water and by the mountains, and they're into outdoor sports and hiking and skiing and all that kind of thing. And I think a show like Exploration Northwest sort of enhanced that outdoor interest, and it allowed people to go places and see things that they couldn't normally do in addition to their regular outdoor activities.
Before you can care about the environment, you have to be aware of the environment. And again, there's just an indifference to it. Well, that's what Exploration Northwest was good at doing that. Not in an overt way. They were certainly not what I would consider tree huggers, but they made us not only aware but deeply appreciate the environment of the Northwest, with all of its diversity and richness and variety and delicacy and balance. That all came through in that show.
I think a show like Exploration Northwest, or any show that takes people outside and increases their awareness of the the beautiful space that they live in, is something that's going to make them more concerned about preserving that space. And Exploration Northwest, I think, certainly did that in an era when maybe it wasn't as popular back then as it is now. But maybe some of the people that were watching Exploration Northwest then may have become people who are motivated to do things now to help preserve things that are important in our environment. And if Exploration did that in any way, I think that was a very valuable thing. And that's another reason that local programming is extremely important.
I don't think Don knew how much the viewers loved him and loved the series. I get to hear that all the time now. He was a great storyteller. He'd love to find out interesting information. And the style of production back in those days was to do a whole half hour on one subject. A whole half hour in-depth story on any number of topics.
The power is in the story, and we're losing our sense of story locally. News is primarily about events and actions. It's not about people, and about the depth and breadth of their stories, and we've lost that. Everything, it just has to happen so quickly now. Nobody takes the time. It's almost like if a story can't be told in a minute 30, it's not told. And that's not storytelling. And so trying to break through that noise and take the time and the effort necessary to tell a story well is a real challenge for broadcasters. And I applaud anybody who attempts it.
And Don was really set the bar for quality broadcasting, and the Northwest has been known to be one of the regions of more quality across the nation.
There was no other show like it. No other broadcaster felt the responsibility to do a program like that. And so the commitment that was made at that time by Como Television was fairly unique in this market. And like most shows of its kind, it had to find an audience. It wasn't a ratings gangbuster in the first few seasons, and they had to make a commitment to do that show, and it was not an inexpensive show to produce at the time. So it was visionary in that sense. And it should be also instructive to the broadcasters of this generation that sometimes you just have to commit to something that matters and that is valuable and stick with it for a while, and it will find an audience.
Through the Captain Puget Show and Exploration Northwest, Don McCune helped to shape and define the character of television in the Pacific Northwest. Don passed away in March of 1993 after a brief battle with cancer.
I get asked this question all the time. How can you bear to see him on the film? Doesn't it make you cry? And I say, no, it makes me feel really good, because my first knowledge of him was this man on the television set. And he's still that man on the television set. I mean, I have my memory of him as my husband, but watching these shows, I just love to watch for these little mannerisms, you know, that were strictly his. Like when our daughter was real young, for the word girl, she said girla. And she was a good girla all the time. And we just called her the good girla. And there, on one of Don's canoeing trips, there's a guide, a woman guide, and she's making up the dinner and hands him a plate, and he said, "Good girla." And and it's just something I hear.
Oh, no, off the side.
Yeah. Take a couple of biscuits.
Couple of biscuits.
Go there and get you some jam.
Oh, good girl. Okay.
I recognize it as important. I love it because my husband did it, but it's an important resource to the Northwest, and it shouldn't be lost.
And I'm supposed to have some brown bread today?
Yep.
Okay.
From Brennan to the Bogoshiel, from Lemmy to Lapush, and from the lordly Salda to the lovely Duckbush, from Samish to Sammamish, from Suquamish to Quilcene, the climate is so friendly, it's a land.
Till next week, then, this is Don McCune reminding you that it's all an Exploration Northwest.
Thank you for joining us tonight on Full Focus. Please visit us online at www.kbtc.org and click on Full Focus.